We're joined now by Peter Vincent. He's a former counterterrorism official with the U.S. Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. Peter, you've got two competing narratives. I just want to read a couple of tweets for you and then just get your reaction. One from the U.S. president. Mexico should move the flag-waving migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, back to their countries. Do it by plane, do it by bus, do it any way you want, but they are not coming into the USA. Now, a different tweet, this one coming from Chris Sherman of the Associated Press, a correspondent in Mexico. This right after yesterday's incident. U.S. Border Patrol has just launched tear gas into Mexico, breeze carrying it hundreds of yards, parents running away with choking toddlers. One sees criminals, the other sees children. What does that say about the divide in the United States?
Mike, that's the fundamental problem here, is that we are so polarized as a society that we tend to demonize the other side when they don't agree with us. Mexico has international treaty obligations, just like the United States, in terms of protecting individuals that are seeking safe haven, that are applying for asylum. And the United States has obligations under U.S. law to provide them safe haven when they can prove that they are facing persecution in their home countries. The vast majority of these individuals are, by no stretch of the imagination, criminals. They are, for the most part, innocent women and children and men that have walked, in some cases, thousands of miles, all the way from the Northern Triangle countries of Central America, of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. The vast majority of them are seeking a life that is devoid of the criminal gangs that plague their societies back home, or are simply looking for greater educational opportunities or employment opportunities in the United States.
You've been in Mexico and Central America. I mean, you know these bad guys. I mean, you've dealt with these bad guys. They are bad guys.
I spent a lot of time with the Obama administration working with our excellent counterparts in Mexico as well as in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. And there are a number of traffickers out there that are indeed very, very bad, who get paid to move people, to smuggle them into Mexico and then ultimately into the United States. But the victims in all of this are the innocent people who are simply looking for a better way of life.
Let's talk about the border. He says he can close it. You've traveled through Tijuana. I have as well. I mean, it seems mind-boggling to me. What kind of devastation would that do in terms of trade?
It's really legally impossible as well as a practical matter impossible. This particular border, Mike, as you well know, sees over 100,000 vehicle and foot visitors per day. It is a massive source of trade and economic boom for both Mexico and the United States. The economic impact alone of shutting that border down, as the U.S. government did for about 6 hours yesterday, is extraordinary. And there is no way that the United States government, even working in conjunction with the Mexican government, could ever shut down the entire southern border of the United States.
How does this surge differ from other attempts to cross the border?
When I was with the Obama administration at the Department of Homeland Security, we dealt with much smaller surges. In 2014, we had a very serious issue of so-called unaccompanied children that were flooding into the United States to the tune of about 50,000 between the months of January 2014 and July 2014. The way we handled that was to work with our counterparts in Mexico and in Central America to try to educate them as to the dangers of that very, very harrowing trip from those countries up through Mexico to the United States. We work together as equals to help solve the problem. The difference that we have now is that individuals are being denied their lawful right, pursuant to U.S. law as well as U.S. international treaty obligations, to apply for asylum, no matter how they enter the United States, either legally or illegally. On November 8th, the Trump administration issued a proclamation stating that only individuals that applied for asylum at formal official ports of entry would be heard. That, again, is a violation of U.S. law and international treaty obligations. And it's created this dynamic where individuals are forced to wait in Mexico for their turn to apply at a port of entry.
You know, I was looking back at Ronald Reagan's 1989 farewell address, the shiny city on the hill, talking about a beacon for freedom lovers. In it, one of the passages is, if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. How is the Republican Party more from the one that adored Ronald Reagan to what it is today?
It really is striking, the difference. And when we look at the protests yesterday of the Border Patrol officers feeling like they needed to use non-lethal force in the form of tear gas, that really establishes a very bad picture, a bad look for the United States, which has been very much, as President Reagan said, a beacon of hope to people all over the world that are fleeing persecution, violence, and torture, or looking for better opportunities for themselves or their children. So I don't understand, despite my best efforts to figure it out, why this vast difference between President Reagan and the current dynamic with President Trump.
Interesting. Peter, thanks so much for coming in and providing analysis.